We are live. Apologies for the delay. We are live now on Facebook and on YouTube. Good morning. Please share with us your greetings and your good morning. Thank you all for joining us here once again. Okay, if you have any, I want to welcome everyone here. Oh, I see now the comments are coming through. 1 second, why aren't I seeing this? Oh, now I see, guys. Apologies. Right, good morning, Helen Feinstein. Thank you for joining us. Philip Zettler from Cape Town, Michael Stain, Tracy Mindel, Trevor Gerson, Larry Cohen. Great to see you all here. Felicia Jenks, Shavua Tov, Shirley Feldman, Helen Miller, thank you. Hill Lipworth, Boker Tov, thank you all. Now I see everyone here. Let me just see what's going on YouTube. Okay, YouTubers, let's hear from you as well. If you're logging on, hold on, still some delay in the YouTube. Avril Walpert, good morning. Thank you for joining us on YouTube. Let's see why some people are not connecting. Aline Udolovitz, thank you for joining us. Boker Tov, thank you. Good. All right, everything okay. Okay, good. Okay, just watching everyone join on. Welcome and Boker Tov. Great, good to see you all. We're going to wait 1 more minute. Sorry for the delay here this morning. Apologies. We're just going to wait 1 more minute to allow for people all to log on, and then we'll get going. Ian Clemenson, Stan Brask, Fega Sega, thank you. Thank you for your wishes. David Seif, Boker Tov, waiting for your learning session. Fantastic. Okay, so whether you're logging on to Facebook or YouTube, we welcome you all here. If you're on Facebook, do me a favor and press the share button just under your screen. Let other people know what you're up to this morning. So I hope you all had a wonderful Shavuot. Very, very different to the norm. Normally on Shavuot, we would have a shul community dinner, followed by a Tikkun Leil learning program, followed by an entire night of learning. Good morning, Philip Gordon on YouTube. Yep, Philip is one of the individuals that traditionally would stick around with me all night through the morning till 5 in the morning learning. It was very, very different this year, obviously. We didn't have the 10 Commandments in shul, which we normally hear. The ice cream parties for the children, that didn't take place either. Sean Margolis, good morning. Shalom Aleichem. Good to see you. Thank you for joining. So many, many different things. Norman, me. Many different things didn't happen this Shavuot, but I hope nonetheless you had an enjoyable and a meaningful and a learning-full and productive Shavuot over the last 2 days of Yom Tov, of Shavuot and Shabbos as well. And now we find ourselves in the day after, in the morning after. And that's something for us to discuss and to unpack a little bit, because it's always the morning after when we start to think, well, what really happened over the last 2 days? The morning after is when you start reflecting, thinking back, looking back. Everyone has to do reflection from time to time. Good morning, Norman. Thank you. Marlene Sher, good morning. Thank you very much. Every morning. Thank you. Yes. So the morning after Shavuot is a time for reflection. It's a time when I think back to how Shavuot was. How did it go? What did I accomplish? What didn't I accomplish? What do I still need to accomplish? As part of the process of reflection. And we think back to Shavuot and we look at the morning after, and that's the question: what's left in the morning after? Well, we all know what happened the first Shavuot, the morning after. In the first Shavuot, the morning after was a disaster. Well, not so much the morning after, but the time period and the sequence of events that took place after the giving of the Torah, the Ten Commandments, was a disaster. We all know how that ended. It ended with the golden calf, where the Jewish people were waiting for Moshe Rabbeinu to come down from the mountain 40 days after the giving of the Torah, 40 days after the Ten Commandments, and Moshe Rabbeinu was delayed in his arrival. He was delayed, and he wasn't coming. He wasn't arriving. And we all know what happened. There was total devastation in the community. Where's Moshe? Why isn't he coming? Why hasn't he returned? And one thing led to the next until eventually they went to serve their idols. And they served the golden calf, one of the greatest tragedies in Jewish history. That all happened after Shavuot. It all happened after the giving of the Torah, which is something for us to ask ourselves. We've got to ask ourselves that question. What went wrong? What went wrong? They just saw the most awesome experience. They had like Tikkun Leil on androids, Tikkun Leil times 10. And yet such a devastation of the Egel HaZahav, the golden calf. This is a warning for all of us. It's a warning that a hype like Shavuot doesn't always produce the ideal outcome into the future. Just because we had an inspiring Shavuot, just because we had an inspiring Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, doesn't always mean that the day after is going to be in sync. Doesn't always mean the day after is going to be inspiring. Because what normally happens is an anticlimax. What normally happens is we climb the ladder of inspiration. And as we get closer and closer to the top and we reach our destination and we get to our goal, and the goal may be a full night of learning, and the goal may be a productive 2 days of Shavuot, and the goal may be getting through a certain chapter or a certain goal of learning or whatever it may be, and we get to our goal, what often happens afterwards is anticlimax. There's a crash. Why? Because I worked so hard to get to my destination. And as I got to my destination, what's left? It's interesting that the terminology the Torah uses for the counting of the Omer is so relevant to this. When we counted the Omer, that means 7 weeks ago, just after Pesach, the terminology was Mimacharat HaPesach, Mimacharat HaShabbat. Mimacharat HaShabbat means the day after Shabbos is when we start counting the Omer. That doesn't necessarily mean Sunday morning, even though there are many of the Sadducees, of the Tzdukim, in the times of the Talmud, they wanted to interpret this to mean the Sunday morning. It doesn't mean the Sunday morning. Mimacharat HaShabbat means the day after the Shabbat, means after Pesach, the first day of Pesach, which is called the Shabbat in that context. After Shabbat, which is the Paschal Lamb and the offering, you start counting the Omer. Why? Why does the Torah call it the day after the Shabbat, the day after Pesach? Because generally what happens is you have such an inspiring Pesach, you have such an inspiring Chag, you offer up the Paschal Lamb, and there's such a big hype. And then the next day comes and boom, we crash. Because we no longer have the Paschal Lamb. We no longer have the hype of Yom Tov. And so what's left? Nothing. It's Mimacharat HaShabbat. It's the day after. And so the Torah tells us, I want you to keep your motivation going. And the way you're going to keep the motivation going is by counting Sfirat HaOmer. Because the moment you finish Pesach, first day Pesach that is, second night, the moment you finish Pesach, you start counting towards Shavuot. Because you now set yourself a new target, a new destination. And so start counting from Pesach until Shavuot, 7 weeks. Because God says, don't crash after that first day of Pesach. Don't crash after all the enthusiasm of the Paschal Lamb and Yetziat Mitzrayim and the Seder night. Don't crash now. Hold on. And straight after the Shabbat, straight after the Pesach night, you start counting the first day of Sfirat Omer. And you start preparing yourself for the next day, for the next 7 weeks, the next target of Shavuot. And I think here the Torah was giving us a lesson. It was giving us a lesson of what to do the day after, the morning after. Like we find ourselves now the morning after Shavuot. We had that guidance from the Torah, Mimacharat HaShabbat, on the day after Pesach. But before I continue, I want to welcome you all here for another morning of daily learning and lockdown inspiration. If you're just logging on now, whether on YouTube or Facebook, we have over 30 students with us on both platforms. So please do comment in the comments bar. We'd love to see you with us. I'd love to welcome you personally. I'd love to engage with you, hear your questions. Please feel free to post any questions you may have in the chat, whether you're on Facebook or YouTube. And I ask our Facebookers to share this so that your friends and family will see what you're up to. And maybe they'll join us as well. So we're speaking about what it means to be in the day after, the morning after the hype of Shavuot, of the Ten Commandments. Good morning, Jared Abelson. Thank you for joining us. This is our Baal Koreh from Sydenham Shul. Thanks, Jared. We heard you laying the Aseret Adibros for us in our program on Wednesday night just before Shavuot. It wasn't the same as hearing it on Yom Tov itself, but at least there was a taste of the Aseret Adibros. And today we find ourselves on the day after. And it's called Mimacharat HaShabbat. It's called the day after, Mimacharat HaShabbat. What happens in the day after? And the truth is that I don't think it starts now. It doesn't start in the day after. It actually starts the night after. Because in Judaism, we know that the next day goes after the night. So the night precedes the next day. That's how it goes in Judaism. So which means Motzei Shabbat is already part of Sunday. Motzei Yom Tov last night was part of today. And the anticlimax that I'm describing of the day after really begins immediately on the night after Yom Tov, the night after Shabbos. We all know it. You know, it comes in time. We feel it every week. We have a Shabbos, and the Shabbos feels restful, and the Shabbos feels inspiring. And as we get to the end of Shabbos and we say Havdalah, we feel like a deflated balloon. The balloon was energized, it was pumped, it was spiritual, it was connected to God. And comes Motzei Shabbos, and we burst the balloon, and we feel like a deflated balloon on Motzei Shabbos. And we even have a custom. On Havdalah of Motzei Shabbos. What's the custom of Havdalah Motzei Shabbos? In Havdalah, we have something called the Besamim, the incense. And we smell the incense. Why do we smell the incense? For that exact reason. Because Motzei Shabbos, because Saturday night is suddenly a anticlimax. Suddenly we're dropping from our inspiration. What does God say? He says, sniff the Besamim. Take a deep smell of the Besamim. And if you take a deep smell of the Besamim, it fills the void of that extra inspiration. Some people call it the neshama yisera, the extra neshama that we get on Shabbos and Yom Tov. It disappears, it leaves us in the straight after Shabbos. So we take the whiff, we take the smell of the besamim to fill that void and give us that push, that boost to keep on going. So even though naturally Motzei Shabbos, Motzei Yom Tov, the next day is somewhat of an anticlimax, God says, smell the besamim, it will give you the extra energy. So how do we do this? It's very nice to smell the besamim, but what does that mean practically? In addition to smelling the besamim, what more is there to do? What more can I do at a time like this, the next day, the day after? So from Pesach, the next day, we started counting Sfirat Omer. And yesterday, in fact, we had the besamim. Normally, Motzei Yom Tov, we don't do besamim. But because yesterday was Shabbos, we took the besamim. And now we find ourselves in the next morning, the next day. And now what? Now what? And the answer is, my friends, that in order to keep that energy going, we've got to set ourselves another target. We've got to have another target, another goal in mind. Each one of us should today decide what my next target is going to be. What's my next goal I'm going to work towards? It's going to keep me motivated, keep me push me, keep me focused. What's my next goal? Is my next goal to learn something extra or to communicate and see how other people are doing as acts of chesed or kindness during this time? There's got to be something new that we commit ourselves to keep us motivated. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the form of learning per se. It can be in the form of tzedakah and chesed and kindness. It could be in the form of prayer and tefillah. Whatever the case may be, it's so important now in this day after, in the following, to set ourselves a new target. And that new target is going to plan the next path for us. It's going to motivate us going forward for however long it's going to take. A few days, a few weeks, whatever the goal is that each one of us sets for ourselves. Because that next goal is called Mimacharat HaShabbat, in the day after the Shabbat. Today, Sunday, what's next on my target? What's next for me to reach? That's the question we've got to ask ourselves. You know, I was once listening to a life coach who came to speak to our young adults as part of a young adult Tuesday night learning program. And this particular coach was telling our young adults how important it is at the end of the day to make a recollection, a calculation of how the previous day went. Because when you assess yourself in the business space or the relationship space or wherever it may be, at the end of the day, just sit down and just think for a few moments how that day went. What was I successful at and what wasn't I so successful at? And she explained to our crowd that was there, the participants, she said, if you do this properly and you highlight for yourselves certain things that weren't accomplished today, but you want to accomplish them tomorrow, you're going to be successful tomorrow. Because tomorrow is going to be productive. It's going to be focused. Because you had that time to actually assess yourself and see what still needs to be done. And I found it fascinating because this is a Jewish thought. Recollection, refocus, reflection is part of Judaism. It's called Cheshbon HaNefesh. We assess ourselves. We analyze ourselves, we do Cheshbon HaNefesh, we calculate where we're holding. And the reason we do it is not just to feel bad or have Jewish guilt. The reason we do it is because with it, we plan the next step. When we know Cheshbon HaNefesh, when we know where we're standing today, we're able to know where we're going to get to tomorrow. That's part of Cheshbon HaNefesh. On Simchas Torah, what happens on Simchas Torah? On Simchas Torah, we traditionally finish V'zois HaBracha. It's the final parsha. V'zois HaBracha, the final parsha of the Torah. It's the siyum. It's the conclusion of the entire Torah. And what happens on V'zois HaBracha? We immediately begin Parshas Bereshis. Now that's not considered Shabbos Bereshis. Right? Shabbos Bereshis is still to come after Simchas Torah. But yet we start the beginning of Bereshis on Simchas Torah. It's very intriguing, very interesting. Why is that? We have a Shabbos. It's called Shabbos Simchas Torah, Shabbos Bereshis. If we have Shabbos Bereshis, then why do we have to lay in Bereshis on Simchas Torah? I want to welcome you all here today for another session of daily learning under lockdown inspiration. If you're just joining us now, please do post in the comments. We'd love to know you're with us. Just share with us a good morning, how was Shavuot on YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching from. I welcome you all here. We're over 30 students between the two platforms. So it's wonderful to have you all with us at this time. If you're from overseas, I'd love to know if anyone here is from overseas. Any Israelis here or Australians here who are logging on with us, just let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear from you as well. We're speaking about what the day after looks like. The day after. We just finished the hype of Shavuot. And now we're in the Sunday. Mimocharat HaShabbat. We're in the day after. Day after the inspiration of Shavuot. And we're trying to understand what it looks like and how we deal with it. So welcome to you all for joining us. Let's continue. I was speaking about Simchas Torah. Simchas Torah, we finished the entire Torah and we start beginning the book of Bereshis. Now, we're going to have a Shabbos called Shabbos Bereshis anyway after Simchas Torah. But on Simchas Torah itself, we lay part of Bereshis. Fascinating. Why? Because here too, God says to us, the moment you finish the Torah, I know what's going to happen. You're going to reach your climax. It's finishing the entire Torah. And then what? Anticlimax. You're going to be a pop balloon like we feel on Motzei Shabbos. We're going to feel deflated because we've reached the Torah. We don't know what to do next. So God says, now start the next round. Begin in Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim et haaretz. It's now time to start reading the next part of the Torah, the next parasha, the parasha of Bereshis, and that's what we do. We start it, even though Shabbos Bereshis is still coming in a few days' time. We begin the laying from Parashas Bereshis on Simchas Torah to tell us at the moment you finish one milestone, you immediately set yourself another milestone. On the high holidays, in many of the areas of davening, if you look through the machzor of the high holiday period, Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, you'll notice that many of the tefillot, of the prayers in the machzor, go in the alphabetical order. So they go from Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, etc., all the way to Taf. So every phrase or every sentence begins with another letter of the alphabet. It seems to be poetic that way. It's not just on the high holidays. We find that in Shabbos as well. That much of our Shabbos davening also follows the alphabet, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, all the way till Taf. But what's interesting is that there's certain paragraphs that they go the other way around. They go Taf to Aleph. Have you ever noticed that? So some go Aleph to Taf, but others go Taf to Aleph. Interesting, hey? So here, the authors of the tefillah, the authors of the davening, are telling us that when the moment you get to Taf, don't stop there. Don't get to your peak, to your climax, meaning the Taf, the end of the alphabet, the end of the Aleph base. Don't get there and then stop. But rather, turn around and start again. And look back and go backwards from Taf all the way to Aleph and reflect and see, what did I do right and what didn't I do so right? What was perfect and what still needs improvement? And so we go from Taf back to Aleph. And here are the authors and the teachers of the Machzor are telling us that that's the message of growth. Growth doesn't just work from Aleph to Taf. Growth also works Taf to Aleph, to look backwards and reflect and look back on where we can improve more. Morning, Brian Olwen, I see your question. Your question is Tachnun. We don't say Tachnun until the end of the 13th. Correct. So on the 14th, we start Tachnun again. to answer your question. If any of you have any other questions, thank you, Brian, for your question. We have over 30 students here this morning. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions about this time period that we find ourselves in, post the Sfirat HaOmer, post Shavuot, we're now in the month of Sivan, just after the giving of the Torah, the Ten Commandments, and the question is, what about now? What's now? What's next? That's the question we've got to ask ourselves. If any of you have any other answers to answer this, give us an input here. We'd love to hear from you. So Brian, thanks for your question there about Tachnun. Yeah, we still say Tachnun. It's interesting. Why are we saying Tachnun? Let's address that for a moment. Why aren't we saying Tachnun? Right, Michael, thank you. 14th of Sivan, correct. Michael staying on Facebook. That's right. Why aren't we saying Tachnun? So the truth is, thank you, Brian, because that does add to our conversation, Brian, your point. Is because every Yom Tov had Yemei Tashlumin, days to catch up the offering. If the offering wasn't brought up on the day of its offering, you had the rest of the days of Yom Tov to offer up the korban of the Yom Tov. But Shavuot being one day in Eretz Yisrael, there's no time to offer up the Yom Tov offering if it hadn't been brought up for whatever reason. Let's say the animal that was designated for Shavuot suddenly had a mum, had a blemish as the Yom Tov offering. And it wasn't able to be brought up Erev Yom Tov or for Yom Tov, on Yom Tov. But they only realized it on Yom Tov. So what do? When you have more days of Yom Tov, you can follow up after the Yom Tov with the sacrifice, with the korban. But Shavuot is only one day. So that's why we have extra days, Yemei Tashlumin, extra days, 7 days extra, to be able to offer up the korban if you missed this morning, if you missed Shavuot. So we got days, catch-up days after Shavuot. So that in a way is a good buffer. It's a good buffer. Good morning, D. Tanner from Cape Town. Good to have you with us. The truth is, every Yom Tov has something called Isru Chag. Shavuot is unique because not only does it have Isru Chag, it has 7 days, but we don't say Tachnun. What's the role of Isru Chag? The role of Isru Chag is that day that connects between the holy and the mundane, between Yom Tov and the weekday. Why do we have an Isru Chag? Because of the same worry that we've spoken about today, about the anticlimax that's going to happen straight after Yom Tov. We don't want to have that anticlimax. So we have a day called the buffer. It's called Isru Chag. And it's there to enable you to take the inspiration of Yom Tov and to infuse it into the next day, into the day of the mundane. As I said, Shavuot is unique. It has 7 days ahead of us, but we don't say Tachnun because we're still living off the inspiration of Shavuot. But that's the role of Isru Chag. Good morning, Linda and Jaime. Thanks for joining us. I'm not a big runner, but apparently there's something in running. Those of you that are big into running will know this. There's something that the runners have, which is the run. Brian, tell us more about this, Brian. Brian's not on any of the chats of Facebook or YouTube. He's chatting to me privately because he can't get onto his computer to chat. So Brian, what's the run after a marathon called? This is your world, Brian. After a marathon, runners go for another run the next day. Not as long as the marathon itself, but it's another run. This is the same theory. Brian will come up with the name in a moment. Let us know what that run is called. Why do you do the extra run after the marathon? because you don't want to get to your peak, hit the marathon distance, do the best you can do, and then stop. Because if you stop, you ain't going to continue. Yes, Brian, but tell me the name of the run. I want to know the name of the run. It's called the follow-up or the post-marathon run. Anyway, it's the same theory. That we go for a run after the marathon so we don't feel that we've reached the climax, and then we drop, and then we stop. That doesn't happen in Judaism. It doesn't happen. What happens when we finish a tractate? Many of you know that I started a tractate of Talmud as we started Sfirat HaOmer. I started tractate Sota because Sota has 49 daf to it. So I started learning Sota from Pesach to Shavuot, 49 days. And thank God, with my son, my boy Tzvi, the Bar Mitzvah boy, thank God we finished together Talmud Sota as Shavuot came. It's a big milestone, 49 daf of Gemara, 1 daf a day. And what do we say at the end of every chapter and at the end of the Masechet, end of the tractate? Hadran alach. What does it mean, Hadran alach? I'll come back to you. We're not leaving that chapter. We're not leaving that tractate. Because if we reach it, if we think we're leaving it, that's anticlimax. We're not leaving the chapter. We're not leaving the tractate. We're going to come back to you. Hadran alach. We're going to come back to that particular tractate, that particular chapter in due course, because that's what Judaism teaches us. As soon as you finish it once, you're going to start it again. You're either going to start it again immediately and do revision on it, or you're going to start a different tractate or a different chapter, but you're going to come back to this. Because you don't just close the book, reach the peak, reach the climax, and then move on or drop it. That's not the way Judaism thinks. So for us personally, for my son and I, we're going to begin another tractate under lockdown. Still working out which Masechet we're going to start. But some of you are already students of Talmud, Talmudic students who have Gemara classes and other such classes of Torah classes. You never reach, the conclusion, close the book, and say, yes, amazing what we've accomplished. But rather, we set ourselves new targets, new goals. That's the message of today. That's the message of the morning after. Never sit back on your laurels. Never sit back and relax and say, I've got there. I've reached it. I've reached my target. Because then you're going to walk away like a deflated balloon. But the inspiration of Shavuot needs to continue into today, into the next 7 days of no Tachnon. And please God, going forward, we carry away that inspiration of Shavuot so that the morrow, the next day, continues the inspiration. And we set ourselves new targets and new goals and new destinations to be able to become better people who continuously aspire to new aspirations. I thank you all for being here this morning. If there's any other comments or questions you'd like to post, please do share them in the comments now on either Facebook or YouTube. We thank all our students, all our listeners, all our viewers today, over 30 of them, who have joined us across the two platforms for being part of another day of inspiration. Will please God be back here tomorrow morning, 10:30. I apologize for the late start today. 10:30 tomorrow morning. We begin. The more you learn, the less you know. Thanks, Robert and Maureen. Yes, that is true. Very, very true. And I'd just like to take the opportunity to wish Ruth Kaplan, who has been joining us every day. I want to wish Ruth long life, Arichus Yamim, for the passing of her husband, Joe. And please God, his neshama should have an aliyah, and daven on behalf of all of us. Shirley Feldman, thank you. Felicia, I must admit I was feeling flat. So was I. Thanks, Felicia. So was I. That's why I came out here today, to get us going again, to get us motivated again. The day after, don't let it sink us. Don't let us bog us down. But rather let us motivate us to set new targets and new goals as we aspire to reach greatness. Thank you, Arlene. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Keep safe, keep sane, and keep spiritual.